The same month that the squad was sworn into office, that included Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, was January 2019. The super PAC Democratic Majority for Israel was stood up with this splashy New York Times profile. It was affiliated with AIPAC. It was founded by Mark Mellman, who is an AIPAC advisor who had led AIPAC's effort to undo Barack Obama's Iran deal. He's also, or he was at the time, a consultant to Yair Lapid, who, as you know, is the head of the Yesh Atid party. Eventually, he actually became, while he was Mellman's client, Prime Minister of Israel. So he's wearing multiple hats. So he founds this super PAC, DMFI, which then kind of does AIPAC's work in the 2020 and 2020 in the 2020 cycle, and they're built basically explicitly to stop the expansion of this faction within the Democratic Party that feels willing to criticize Israel. In May 2021, the last time there was a major war on Gaza, the Squad and a number of other House Democrats went to the House floor denouncing Israel's attack on Gaza, and that was sort of an alarm bell for AIPAC. And so AIPAC itself then, after that, launched its own super PAC after DMFI had spent millions itself. And in that cycle, the 2021-22 cycle, spent more than $30 million. Now they're looking to spend significantly more this cycle.
And you also say that the rise of the Squad and the rise of the counter-revolutionary forces has been simultaneous. Could you elaborate on that? Because obviously Donald Trump never tires of criticizing the Squad as if they are in charge of the Democratic Party.
Yeah, it was really remarkable to go back and kind of re-report this story, the arc of kind of starting with, the Bernie Sanders campaign in 2015-16 up through today, to see just how central this question of Israel-Palestine has been, to the kind of pushback and the reaction to the rise of the Squad the entire time. The Democrats in 2018, if you remember, they ran against Trump, they ran against his wall, his xenophobia, his Muslim ban. And much of the first 6 months of the Democratic majority in 2019 was spent with Democrats, sometimes joined by Trump, sometimes not, coming after Ilhan Omar or Rashida Tlaib, for various transgressions in tweets or speeches or otherwise. And it really kind of dictated and determined what the entire kind of progressive wing was doing. And so that oftentimes you'll have the organization Justice Democrats or members of the Squad say, why are you spending so much time focusing on Israel-Palestine? And the answer would be, they're not. It's actually the reaction. They're kind of forced to. And so that the amount of spending that was done against them and that continues to be done against them kind of forged them into a cohesive political formation that might not actually have existed otherwise. But so in the 2022 cycle, like you said, that's when they spent millions against not just Nina Turner, the most high profile example that they kept out of Congress, but also across the country, going after progressives who were critical of Israel, but also were progressive because the same kind of hedge fund, private equity executives, baseball team owners that are funding AIPAC and DMFI also have the same kind of interests as any major business owner would. So the same agenda that forms kind of the Squad criticism of Israel also their support of Green New Deal, Medicare for all, higher closing tax loopholes for the wealthy. So it's kind of a bonus that you kind of can align your class interests with this fight against Palestinian rights.
So if you can talk more, Ryan Grim, about this election year, about the $100 million, who's involved with that, about the targeting of the Squad Plus, more people who are allied with the Squad have been elected since then. And also the role of Mark Penn and Burson Marsteller
in our government.
Right. So 2022 was the first time in its history that AIPAC did its own super PAC. Previously, it had given directly to campaigns, or its members had given directly to campaigns, and DMFI had done a super PAC kind of affiliated with AIPAC, but not straight from them. 2022 was the first time they did that, and they came through, like I said, more than $30 million in some races. Spending more than $5 million. They spent millions against Summer Lee in the Pittsburgh race in the last month of the campaign. But there was enough kind of pushback from an organized group of progressive super PACs and also small donors that she was able to just barely hang on. And so in 2022, they really tried to kind of constrain the growth of the squad and squad-aligned factions within the party. This cycle, they're really trying to shrink them. Like you said, there's been reporting that there have been offers of $20 million to two different candidates to try to run against Rashida Tlaib. They've successfully recruited candidates to run against Jamal Bowman. Cori Bush has a challenge. Ilhan Omar has a challenge. So now they're coming kind of directly at them. Now, Mark Penn and Nancy Jacobson are also kind of main characters in this book as well, along with Mark Penn's protege, Josh Gottheimer, who's a congressman from North Jersey, who's sort of like the chief antagonist of the squad. And they have raised tens of millions of dollars over the years for this organization. No labels, also from hedge fund executives, private equity folks, football team owners, Home Depot CEOs, that kind of crowd. They try to present themselves as this kind of non-aligned centrist organization. Nancy Jacobson has said AIPAC is one of the organizations that she works most closely with, and of course, famously now they're trying to recruit a Joe Manchin type figure to run as a quote unquote kind of independent in the presidential campaign, which presumably would be to the benefit of Trump.
You mentioned Josh Gottheimer, the congressman from New Jersey. Could you talk about his history before he got into Congress?
Yeah, it is an interesting history because not only does it have this kind of standard kind of pro-Israel activism, but he worked with Mark Penn for many years, and Mark Penn did a lot of his business with Saudi Arabia, and that gets to kind of a creation of a political alliance in Washington that didn't get a lot of publicity over the years, which is the teaming up of the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and Israel. Those two countries still don't even recognize Israel, but in Washington, the three of them were spending enormously, basically to counter Iran, and to counter Iran, and also, of course, to push back on kind of any climate agenda that might get in the way of where their fossil fuel interests lie, and that often meant targeting kind of the left flank of the Democratic Party. And so Josh Gottheimer kind of became the kind of lead antagonist against particularly Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar. Just repeatedly pushing for censure resolutions, going on cable news regularly to denounce his colleagues, and encouraging other Democrats to then also denounce them, teaming up with Hakeem Jeffries to do a kind of a super PAC that was aimed at kind of going after them and going after kind of squad aligned candidates as well. So that's really the kind of nexus of this civil war that's going on inside the House Democrats.
We have about 2 minutes to go, Ryan, and I'm wondering if you can talk about what most shocked you in the research for your book, The Squad.
I think it was the sheer amount of money that was involved and just how dominant it'd been, because we can say the numbers over and over again, 30 million, 40 million, $100 million, but what doesn't quite come through is how that influences not just the races where money is spent, but also where it's not spent. And so I heard of so many different conversations that would be held among consultants and campaigns that were worried that AIPAC or DMFI was going to start spending millions of dollars in their race. And they would meet, they'd have a conference call, and they'd figure out, okay, how do we stave this off? And so this is without AIPAC even spending a dime. And they would say, well, the easiest thing we do is let's just post, I stand with Israel. And some candidates would just do that. And then others would reach out to DMFI. John Fetterman, his campaign did this. Others did it as well. and say, what do we need to do? Like, what kind of policy positions do we need to publicly have so that you're going to stay out of this race? Not that you're going to fund us, but that you're not going to fund our opponents. And that really, to a shocking degree, constrained, what Democratic candidates were willing to say when it came to criticizing Israel.
Ryan Grim, we want to thank you so much for being with us, D.C. Bureau Chief for The Intercept. Ryan's new book is called The Squad, AOC and the Hope of a Political Revolution. And